I'm Melissa Rowe, and you're listening to Dollars, Diplomas, and Decisions, made possible by the Uncommon Individual Foundation and On Track Plus. Our guest today is Liz Walker. Liz Walker is the director of TRIO College Access Initiatives and Upward Bound at Harcum College. For over 20 years, she has focused on how education can be a healing and empowering journey of personal and social change. In 2008, Liz became a certified full-circle doula and birth educator with an intention to provide quality birth services for women and families. In 2013, Liz formally began her yoga journey, receiving her teaching certification. She has found that incorporating yoga and meditation into her work as a director, educator, and doula has had profound effects in supporting her vision. She is also a proud alumna of Bard College. Liz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We are excited to have this conversation and hear what you have to say to our audience about getting their kids to school in a smart way that makes sense and dollars. So Liz, you are a mom. You are a longtime educator and advocate for young people. And running the TRIO programs at Harcum, one of the things that I like to know is, how is your team supporting students and families through this college access and college graduation process?
So one of the biggest things I think that we provide even before we're beginning conversations about college and education is a social respite. It's really important that students and children, particularly teenagers, have spaces with their peers, with shared interests, shared focus for their future. And so our particular population often comes from schools in Philadelphia that don't have strong educational attainment backgrounds. So we'll have scholars in our program that in their school setting might be one of 20 that actually want to go to college, whereas within Upward Bound, the whole entire cohort wants to go. And so they help each other. I do have a background with Philadelphia Freedom Schools. And so one of the really important aspects that has been brought into this program too is to develop a concept of cultural awareness and a sense of purpose. So young people have to have a why that roots them and grounds them in where they're at in the present moment and where they want to go. And so those are some of the qualities that we brought to the table within our particular Upward Bound program, in addition to developing the academic and educational skills that they need to succeed.
Liz, your program serves a fairly diverse population of students from various religions, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. With all of these differences, what are the core skills or experiences that are shared among those who find the most success with college attainment?
So one of the first skills that we see is the ability to show up, attendance in school and attendance in extracurricular programs like Upward Bound. That is very, very important. And behind that individual, that young person that wants to show up, those who really succeed have someone fighting in their corner to make them show up. So a lot of times we work with students that are so motivated, are successful. Oftentimes their parent may have other children in the home, younger children that are taking up a lot of the attention. So it feels like, the teenager's got it covered. He's always been so independently driven. By the time they're teenagers, though, and they're working on their college process, it's important to make sure that someone is there somewhat micromanaging their affairs so that, no, you did show up to that Saturday program you committed to. You did follow through on that thing. In line with that is also communication. So there's a strong difference between the teenager or the young person and scholar that is unable to text us back when we reach out to them, and those that do text us. If they're not able to show up, they let us know, I'm not able to show up. It's some core relationship building abilities that more often than not is hard to come by in the next generation that we're serving. So I think those are some really important aspects. Another piece is the ability to ask questions. to advocate for, to have the confidence to ask a question too, to be in a setting and to be able to comfortably say, I don't know this thing, can you help walk me through it? And another thing is just helping for that young person to be able to utilize the supports around them. And so we talk a lot about, again, we're going back to relationship building, building community, building a cohort of peers that want to do the same thing that you want to do, keeping that strong, and then adults who are there to support them. So, we often talk about how it takes a village, but especially when it comes to this college process, it's very important.
Liz, students in your program have found a lot of success, not just getting to college, but getting out of college. And we know in this work, that's one of the harder things to do, right? We can get a lot of kids into school, but can we get them graduated with the degree in a reasonable amount of time with as little debt possible? From working with you, I know that you have a formula. So can you talk with us, if a parent is not able to access your program, what's the formula? What should they be considering when considering college?
Yes, definitely. And I'll say this, in the years that I've done this work, we started out pushing students to graduate from college, and it went from graduate from college to graduate from college debt-free or with as little debt as possible. So the trajectory has definitely changed. The formula, I have to give you honor first, Melissa, because your work with Capture Greatness really came in and started to promote scholarship acquisition, and that formula of being able to develop several writing samples as early as sophomore year, junior year, that those writing samples then could go into, we have several handpicked scholarships for them. But if they have that 3 or 4 or 5 writing sample selection by the time they're juniors, finding 25 scholarships that are handpicked that they're eligible for to apply to creates a greater success rate. Part of the formula also begins, like really even before high school, where we're promoting for our students to create that community, create that network, communicate with their counselors, actively participate in community service, so that they're creating recommendations as they go through high school. So making sure that college portfolio is something, or that college report card is something that they're thinking about as early as 9th grade. Hey, we're building your resume before you even go to high school. You're connecting with your counselor before you're even in high school, so that then when you go through the doors, your counselor is like, oh, I know Melissa. I got an email from her this summer. So I think that the formula starts as early as 8th, 9th grade, or before that. It involves exposure. It involves visiting college campuses. It involves that community service and developing the portfolio. And then by the time we get to the junior year, where the student has, and the family has seen several colleges and universities, kind of has identified some of the ones they want, we start to look at the budget line by line of what each of those colleges will look like, so that the concept of college and the concept of post-secondary is not just a fantasy or the excitement of, I want to go to this campus that I saw, or that has this football team, or whatever it is. It's really going down to the dollars and cents of what that experience is going to look like. That's a very scary step to hit, as a family, because a lot of times, I think parents, we want to provide the best for our children. You're going to go, I'm going to make it work for you. Yet when we really get to the dollars and cents, depending on how each family manages their personal finances, those are not always conversations we have at the dinner table, So the formula that we have really starts out with developing their college portfolio, making sure that they're involved in leadership positions, making sure that they've got strong community service and they've got strong recommenders, and then developing their scholarship potential by making sure they have those writing samples, and then sitting down and having a budget line item of each college. So by their junior year, they're able to see, I've got 5 identified that I'm shooting for, maybe 5 to 10. These are going to be the costs related to them. These are the scholarships I'm applying for. If I get half of the scholarships I apply for, if I get 3 of the scholarships I apply for, so it starts to make sense, So I think that that's one of the main ones. Once they are accepted and they get those college acceptances in, and we start to see award letters coming in, we need to know what the institution is providing them. That then gets dropped into that same budget. So it's, using a Google sheet, just like you would with your home finances, and starting to shift that. And so I've seen students firsthand have very big ideas, and families too, of where they wanted to go. But then when we start to calculate the costs and say, well, look, this college is a train ride away. How much does the train ride cost? If you're going to go back and forth 3 times a year, what's that going to do versus the one that's closer to home? Or, so those are the kind of conversations that we definitely have that make all the difference in terms of the success. So I know that when a family has sat down with our coach and has gone through that budget, that they have a strong plan of action, that it's not just in the ethos. It's something that they can really do and they can commit to.
Yeah, I remember one year we were going through that activity with some of the students, and there was a very popular university that's close by but not in state. And so students had to factor the fact that if they went to this university, they would lose their state funding, right? They would lose their grant money. And what type of dorm did you want to live in? And a lot of times the students didn't even know that there were different costs associated with different dormitories, right? And so it's like, well, which one would you want to live in? Because there's a difference of $5,000 a year just based on where you are on campus.
Yeah. So that conversation can become very overwhelming if it's happening after senior year, even if we're waiting for the award letters to come in and the acceptances to come in and it's the spring of senior year, that can be a hard one. But if we're having those conversations earlier on, by the time we get to the senior year, it doesn't hold the same level of anxiety for the family or for the child.
So for parents wondering what they can do to set their children up for a successful transition into college, what are some of the things you would suggest?
Well, the first thing, like I said earlier, I really think that parents need to be micromanaged to a degree. So this is one we're going to tread lightly, but I think making sure that if they've made the commitment to show up somewhere, sometimes they need to be woken up to go. Even the most responsible ones, if it's a rainy day, this is the time you got to show up. So maintaining a level of motivation for the child. The other thing, though, in line with that is I really believe that parents need to stop and also listen more. Listen to what your child is saying that they want. Listen to what they're saying they don't want. Ask more questions as opposed to projecting your view of what you want for them onto them. I think that's very important. One of the biggest mistakes I do see parents who do want college for their child is doing too much then. So no, you're not going to write the scholarship essay for your child. You can sit down and help them. You can make sure they go to the workshop, but you're not going to write it for them. If you find yourself starting to fill out the applications for them, you're doing too much. But carving out a space and time and a schedule so that they're sitting down and doing it, checking the work, making sure that they've done it and they've submitted it to the person who's really there to check the work, the professional, whether it's an English teacher, a college coach, or whoever. I think from the college aspect, I do, working at Harcum College, I hear a lot of mistakes that parents of freshmen in college make is that they're still at the point where they're calling the college for the child. So any phone calls, and this is something that even can start, again, ninth grade. If you're ordering takeout, have your child call for takeout. If you're at the restaurant, have your child go up and engage and do the bill. But that interaction and that skill to interact is something that's also we're losing a little bit in this day and age due to cell phones and the opt-out option that a lot of our children have. So really empowering them to do that communication work with the people around them. If they are going to miss an activity, did you contact the coach and let them know that you couldn't go and why? So that's a micromanagement technique where the child might not think, oh, I need to contact this person. What should I do? the parent is then giving them that skill set, but that's a huge skill set in terms of developing the right relationships and creating the right connections that's going to empower them. The parent can definitely and should definitely be having budget conversations with the child earlier on. And so if you don't want to disclose all of your household's, budget, but technically when it comes time to really filling out FAFSA and filling out all the information, your income, all of that gets reviewed, so I think it's important to have that conversation earlier on to get comfortable with it. So really the key is communication, transparency, and then, budget management, developing the skills of communication and independence, creating spaces for independence. So a lot of us are afraid to see our children go to, let's say, live in a dorm for a summer, but that's an important space to build the independence in the child so that the dream and the skills to go to college are now coming from the child and not the parent themselves. Did I mention exposure? Because I think exposure is a huge one. So visiting college campuses, building the village and the network for the child so that your child has whether it's cousins, play cousins, but people who they see going to college, making sure that they have levels many members of generations to turn to. So even in my own personal life, when it was time for my goddaughter to go to college, her mother was having certain conversations with her. I went in on the back end and had other conversations with her, and so we have to utilize our village as parents. We have to be able to give them an array of people to look at and see themselves in. So as much as possible, my son is 3 and I'm already thinking, okay, who's 5 years older than him that I can nurture now so that when they're in college, I've got a place for him to go, a trusting place too. I think that's one of the things, again, going back to the roots of Freedom School that were really embedded in us is how do you create some of those rites of passage spaces where when children are getting into teenage years, they've got a cohort of people of all ages that are there to support them in the same vision, and we all have the same vision for this young person. So
that's so important, Liz. And it is important to know that parents can kind of cast a vision. Mm-hmm. But listening to your child and also seeing their vision might mean that there's room and space for conversation, and to even think about what's going to be best for this particular child. Even parents with multiple children, they might not all land in the same college. They might not all take the same post-secondary pathway. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the transparency and communication around budget. Mm-hmm. And so I like to know if a parent, right, they are in lockstep with their child and they know that their top choice college is ABC College. This is the college this kid has been wanting to go to. And so now you've done the formula, you have your spreadsheet, you know how much this school will probably award this kid an aid. And it comes down to the final acceptance and financial aid award letter. And the parent sees that there is a gap in funding. So the school might have awarded your child even their top scholarship, but there's still another $10,000, let's say, that your family will be responsible to come up with every year. How would a parent decide if they can actually afford that gap in funding?
So this comes up every year, and it's a very hard and sad reality of what we cannot do is allow the child to go to school not having a clear, this is where this money is coming from to cover that, especially with my first generation population and with the parents that are riding hard for them. I was like, you're going to go to college because, that's everything we've ever wanted. The child wants to go. But if that money is not there, we have to adjust the trajectory. So one of the things is to make sure when we are looking at schools to have the range. They always talk about safe schools in terms of what your child can get into, but they don't talk about safe economic schools. And so that's a really important piece. I think that it's okay to start grounding yourself in it might not be what we thought we wanted, but I'm a firm believer in what's best for me is going to be. And so giving them that life skill. I think it's easier as a family to have that conversation when you do have a professional there saying, okay, realistically, where would the $10,000 come from? If this is not possible, what else can you do? Because I've seen children and scholars be able to make that shift themselves once they realize, like, I know my mom can't pay for this. I know this is unreasonable. And it's okay. And I think that's the other thing is that there are so many post-secondary options available. One of the things that I think that our young people get trapped up into is that, it's all focused on this high school graduation and this thing right after, but you have a long life to live after that. And so giving them the opportunity as well to see that there's so many twists and turns in this journey where you might not get to the thing that you thought you were going to get to here, it's going to work out. So focusing on what that young person really wants for themselves. So if they want a particular career or they want to pursue a particular thing, there's ways around doing that where it's not necessarily tied to this one institution. It's tied to that's your dream. The college is not the dream. It's what you want to become through college but it's a hard one and we have to be prepared to say we can't afford that. That's not realistic for us. But what is? And so that's where you want to always make sure that you have that range of schools that you're choosing from, keeping your options open too. So one of the things that I've seen is that more and more young people are saying college is not affordable. Like young people will say, there's no point in going into debt. I'm not going to get the job after that I, want anyway. But what I try to get them to see is that this portal that you do have to make as much money as possible to get to college is happening now. So let's keep your options open. You can still be an entrepreneur and go to college. You can still get be the TikTok person, the social media, the influencer and go to college. You can still, all of the things that child might want to do, they can still do and go to college. So it's about having just a range of conversations with them.
That is so true, right? Because you get to your senior year and there's all this hype about which school you get into. And honestly, there are a few people who care about which school you graduate from on the other end of this, right? And for some of our students, they're not only looking at having to pursue an associate's or a bachelor's degree, they're looking at graduate school. Mm-hmm. So you have another opportunity, right, to access the school that maybe you wanted to access. There's opportunities for students to transfer, into their school. So I think this idea that what you do at 17, 18 in your senior year is end all be all. And that is just not the case at all. Life is really rich, right? In resources and opportunities. You talked earlier about some of the students in your program coming from schools where they are the high flyers in their schools. They represent maybe the minority of students who are knowing, right, that they are going to college right afterwards. And I'm wondering for parents and students who might find themselves in more of like lackluster high school environment, what are some recommendations you have for them to get access to, other programming or find like-minded individuals, again, if they're not able to access an Upward Bound program?
One is to be involved and communicate, be persistent in the communication, oftentimes showing up at parent community functions for the school is one that will set you apart immediately. Most cities have an abundance of resources. You just have to start tapping in and looking for them. This is one right here, and so I think finding yourself connecting to those programs, those extracurricular spaces that foster that, connecting to students who are going through that process. Again, we're looking at that like 5 years older than my child is already here, and so really connecting with that person or that family to walk through that. I find a lot of advocacy is needed for the parent within the school. So incidents occur every day with our students that aren't necessarily fair or that will affect their portfolio, and so just being able to create a relationship with the school that their child is in is important. I think, again, just the community that you're keeping, the questions that you're asking are really important, when you're in those spaces with other extracurricular programs, any city programs. It's important to just talk and see what's available.
Liz, will you talk to us about how you and your team show up as advocates for your students and how parents can be advocates as well?
Well, we do a lot of work in the school itself. So I do notice that there, again, with our teenage population, oftentimes parents kind of start stepping back at that age group, where they, especially if you have other children in the home, you've got this. They're especially if it's a self-motivated child. Like, I don't have to worry about him. He's great, When in reality, you do want to still maintain the same level of involvement that you did when they were younger. And so that's allowing yourself to create those relationships with the schools and the professionals in the school. I say find your resources wherever you go. I'm also really big on when we go into school spaces to go with, offerings for the people that are taking care of our children. So, you know what I mean? Bringing some fruit, honoring those people that are showing up for them, whether we like them or not. Even if we don't think that they necessarily have the skill set that our children need, it's like, you catch more bees with honey. And that's that's one important way to advocate. I actually learned that as a doula going into hospitals. Like, this is how we take care of our nurses who are taking care of our patients. So that's one thing. I think also a really big level of advocacy is transparency. So I can't tell you how many times we have families where children are moving actually on campus and they're not fully transparent about the child's needs. It's okay. And it's actually amazing when, as a care provider for that young person, to be able to have a conversation with a parent and realize, like, oh, she's known that this child's struggling with this particular thing. We can now work together to help support. So I think taking the veil of shame off when our children are not perfect or, do have challenges with learning or challenges with their health that they don't want to talk about. Those are all areas, challenges with their hygiene. Like, there are all these areas that as a parent, you can't do it all. So once again, trusting that village of people that's around them. And 9 times out of 10, the people that are actually showing up every day and working in the schools or in whatever the extracurricular spaces, there's a love and a passion for child success. So they're gonna when they see that transparency and vulnerability, they're gonna show up as well.
Absolutely. And I think the more parents understand that they can work with their child's high school, that, in the high school, that's where you can find some of what we call your college team, right? We know we have to depend on teachers and maybe some administrators, counselors for sure, for letters of recommendation, but their advocacy and their sewing into your child happens way before we actually get to that college application process. So that is really important to keep in mind for folks. So Liz, we spoke with Senator Haywood, and he says that one of the reasons why Pennsylvania college students have some of the highest debt, student loan debt in the nation, is because we have lower taxes in Pennsylvania. And also as a state, we spend more money on prisons than our college system. What is your assessment on that? Or how do you feel when hearing that?
It's sad. I mean, it's very sad. The work that I do in particular with Trio Upward Bound, this is a grant that's here to serve schools that are the most at risk and have the most need. So we're working in environments where the counselors, there's no ratio of student to counselor. That's like a minimum, and that's nearly impossible when you also look at the level of trauma that most of our students in Philadelphia are experiencing. I mean, so that's like, even before we're getting into conversations around exposure and going to college and wanting to go to college and then financing that experience, we're talking about healing the heart of the child that's witnessed some things, which more often than not, most of our children have. And so, it's not uncommon to be in an environment and to be in a room where there's 30 students, and in that 1 year, a large number of them have witnessed with their own eyes somebody they cared for being shot or killed. And this is like every summer when they come and live on campus, there's a story, where somebody in the community that most of them know, something has happened and that person is in the hospital or that person has died. So the amount of emotional trauma that's going on, and I was saying I don't think it's just Pennsylvania. It's really what's going on in as a nation. But when you look at the amount of money that's being poured into prisons, and you look at the amount of money that's being, offered into educational spaces, it is very clear that we are living we are living a traumatic cycle. Something's going, where whenever you have a situation where children too are aware of the statistic of them graduating and going to college versus them getting shot. And that is a horrendous reality. And so I think that what we try to do as a program in a communal space and a collective space is to honor the reality of that, honor how that feels and how does that actually, I'm more concerned with how that impacts a young person's sense of themselves, and what society is banking on for them versus, that's my only way to get out of it right now, is to keep empowering them through the formula, through this scholarship acquisition, through focusing on there's money out here for you. So while that might be a reality, and that is the reality, we have to deal with what we can do. And we have more than enough opportunity to create scholarships for ourselves, pathways to get to college and afford it, and to go debt-free. Like, this is also not a motto that we just sell. Like, I've seen it firsthand from the time you started Capture Greatness for us and showed us what that strategy was, and we connected that with what we were doing with our budget piece. It all comes together, and I see students that are literally walking out of college without debt and actually having a financial portfolio to then invest in. So I think that we're breaking the curse of that every day, but we have to do that. We have to keep our children motivated. Every year I ask, what are the obstacles that, for my students, what are the obstacles you're experiencing right now? It is very real, like winter fatigue or, that depression. They go through it. They are overworked. They're not sleeping. They are tired. They are stressed. This generation struggles with stress management. So we have to tune into their mental health. We have to tune into their abilities. Some of the most successful families, when I go to talk to them, hey, what are you doing? How are you? How is it that I've seen 3 children from your home and they're all going to college debt-free now? Like, what's going on? I do check-ins with them. I ask how they're feeling. I listen to them. So those are things as parents that we really need to do, because the political reality can have really profound effects on our children's motivation and sense of self. And so that's the other thing, is that rooting them again with that cultural sense of pride, that sense of self, that purpose, that why that extends beyond what the external forces are. Because we know for a lot, external forces have been meant to tear you down in the country since the beginning. Yeah. That's just the reality. Does that have to affect you? Not right now, because we can do things about it, and this is what we do. So that's the message that we give a lot,
Yeah, I think it says a lot about where we feel we would rewards, right? Mm-hmm. So the state thinks that it will profit more from sowing money into the prison system than into our kids, right? Mm-hmm. Into public education, into our state-related schools, so that our kids can show up and be the people they want to be. And here's the thing that's interesting for me. Realistically, with our students graduating with the second highest amount of student loan debt, it means that they won't have a lot of money, to spend and sow into the economy if we don't get them to school with scholarships, right? And one of the things that has been most transformational in how I see this work around helping students and families access scholarships is a student from your Harcum's Upward Bound program. She secured enough money to go to 2 of the undergraduate programs she was interested in. She chose the one that would also give her scholarship dollars to do her advanced degree, and then called me and said, well, Ms. Rowe, I think maybe we should talk about me buying a house because I don't have debt. I already know how my master's is going to be paid for. So can we move on? Can we move on with the next part? She's ready. And she's serious, right?
Yeah.
And so to think about how freeing it is, not only for that student, but for many students and parents, because we have parents who are thinking the only way I can get my kid into college, or the only way they can get a degree, is if we all go into debt to get this degree. But I mean, imagine, mom, dad, that you send your kid to school, they have the dollars that they need to complete the degree, and your retirement is yours. You don't have to borrow, you don't have to work long overtime hours and things like that, but that your child is on a path to be not only smart and educated, but financially successful too.
Definitely. And that's we have to preach it. We have to get it out there. We have to get that information out there so they know, because it's more than feasible. We're seeing the success. We're seeing it happen. Like you said, there are scholarships out there for everyone. And so when you tap into those resources and you start to ask the questions and you start to connect with the people and you start to look for them, you'll find them. You will find them. So definitely.
Absolutely. As we close out, Liz, is there anything else you want to offer? Maybe a parent who's still not totally convinced, or a student that just needs a little more encouragement?
I think the biggest thing is yes, it's possible. It's more than possible. We need to start earlier on than ever before. So a lot of us are coming from a generation where we didn't start having conversations until junior year, senior year, 8th grade. We're talking about them. I'm trying to bring 7th graders onto Harcum's campus to look at specialty degree programs. Vet nursing is a field that so many children wanted to be vets when they were little, and then by the time they're in middle school, they're not thinking about it anymore. But there's money in those fields. And, so I think just exposure, I think staying motivated is huge. Just please stay motivated. Trust the process too. And that's the other thing, is that when we're asking you to complete a college portfolio, starting 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, it seems so far away, but no, it's important. Trust the process, because by the time you're a junior, that thing is going to look incredible. You're going to you're going to already have recommenders. You're going to already be thinking about it. And the dollars will come. The dollars will definitely come.
Liz, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. You gave us some actionable tips that we can take home and that we can utilize. And so we really, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody here.